I had this dog. His name was Zeus. He was a Chow Chow. I was told at the time that the Chow Chow breed was one where they presented themselves to other dogs as if they were superior in some way to other breeds. Zeus was a stunning looking dog. Beautiful red fur, a black tongue. He looked like a tiny little bear when he was a puppy. He was gorgeous. Everyone loved him. As he grew older, he was playful and strong, but he was fiercely independent. Zeus liked to run away. Any opportunity Zeus had to get out of the yard and run, he would. He'd take it. Zeus was well loved. He went everywhere with us, and people loved what he looked like. But the image of Zeus to other dogs was a different story. Zeus was seen by other dogs to be arrogant, overconfident, obnoxious. Zeus was not like that to me at all. Zeus was a handful, but he was honest and kind and superbly loyal. Zeus was an imposter alone. He understood who he was. I understood who he was. Other dogs, they did not. Welcome to the 13 Elephants podcast. My name is Dr. Michael. Follow 13 Elephants and my story on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. And please subscribe to 13 Elephants on YouTube. I appreciate you all. I thank you all so very much for allowing me into your space to share the story. This is the 13 Elephants podcast. I am Dr. Michael. Come along for the ride. Today's episode is about the imposter alone. The imposter alone is different in some way to imposter syndrome, because an imposter alone is known to self, yet unknown as self to others. Therefore, I am a third space imposter alone. When I was working in the disability sector, it was pretty clear that it was a very foreign environment for me. I was supposed to understand in some way what it was like to be disabled. But how could I? How could I understand that when I wasn't that? How could I understand the experiences of those people who had severe difficulties in some instances in terms of their ability to do things? How could I understand that when I hadn't had that experience myself? While I was there working in that industry, which I did find to be probably the most difficult industry that I had worked in my career, while I was there, I befriended many of the people that went and used the services there. Many of these people were, again, disabled in a way that was possibly to others very, very severe. To me, I came to understand disability as something that was not a disability at all. If anything, it was a valued ability that these people had to be able to function in a way that others would see as striving to be normal. One of the people that I saw on a regular basis would come into my office, and he had cerebral palsy. It was rather debilitating as it kind of declined over the time I was there, but once I got familiar and started to understand how to behave as myself with this particular person, I became familiar with knowing that it was perfectly okay to not know what it was like to be disabled. I just needed to be in the presence and understand what it was like for someone to explain what it was like to be disabled. So the more I was around those situations, the more I became familiar with my own self within there. I understood that I could understand and have empathy, and in some ways have a real knowledge of what it was like to be with, around, and among people with disabilities. But in doing that, I felt I was an imposter because I became passionate about understanding what it was that people with disabilities needed. Yet I wasn't that. I didn't have a disability. I didn't have the experience that they had, and I found that I was an imposter to self because I was trying to describe an experience that I didn't have any real knowledge of. And it was difficult. It was difficult to put that into an understanding that would make sense to people. And even more difficult when I had to advocate for people with disabilities with passion, because I felt so connected yet disconnected. In a similar way, when I was studying at university, and I'd gone through Te Tuma, which is the Māori department at Otago University, I'd gone through really as far as I could in terms of completing my master's degree, and I went on to do a PhD. However, I was unable to do my PhD at the University of Otago because the scholarships available were only to Māori, and I was not Māori. Even though I had full support of everybody at the university, I couldn't get a scholarship because the ones that were available were only available to those people of Māori descent, and that was not me. I had an affinity and understanding of what it meant to be Māori because I had been around it and immersed in it and had the support of Māori all of my academic life and before that. However, I felt like an imposter to speak on behalf of Māori simply because I was not Māori. And I was alone in that as a Pākehā, as a white male in that environment. I felt like an imposter. And it wasn't until I had the support of Māori to say, look, you're one of us, you can speak on behalf of us, that I felt any level of understanding about it being okay to speak on behalf of Māori. I did lecturing for a little while down there in Otago University, and it was lecturing about feminism to feminists. And as a male, Pākehā, at the time I think I was in my 40s, to lecture on feminism to feminists is quite a difficult thing to do. You know, I was able to do that because I had learned the experiences of those people who in some way were disenfranchised because of who they are, how they self-identified, or to what in-group they belonged to. So I could understand how I could lecture and teach these students in a way that would be respectful. And I was confronted often and critiqued heavily. However, I understood that I had some examples I could draw from which would feed into their story. But again, I felt like an imposter alone because I wasn't necessarily a feminist. I didn't necessarily come from that positionality. Being a dad, a husband, a son, all of these things had an impact on how I self-identified and how I measured up. And I felt, again, that I was an imposter alone, that I was behaving in a way that I thought was appropriate to behave in any given context, but it was not always the correct way to be. I wear bangles. I wear nail polish. I've been told that I'm gay. I've been told that I'm effeminate. I've also been told that I'm far too masculine. All of these things about who I am, how I present, how I engage in the world, positioned me as an imposter alone. The third space experience allowed me to understand that it was okay to be me, but to define me based on what the others in society perceived me to be was impossible. How could I do that? How could I define myself in a way that would meet the obligations and the representations that were made of me, of all people? How could I do that? I couldn't section off myself to be a certain person to multiple different people. I was only me, and I continue to only be me. But it makes me an imposter alone in my thoughts and feelings and understandings of how I present. I'm often told that I'm fake, or I'm a manipulator, or that I'm not man enough, or not woman enough. I'm measured in a number of ways by other people, whether it be in general society, whether it be in a work environment. As we all are measured, as we all are told we are these things that we may not be. When we're told how wonderful we are, how good we are, when we're supported to do things, when we're engaging in activity where people are saying that we are brilliant at that activity, and we can't quite feel that way inside. We don't quite get how we could possibly be these amazing things that people are telling us we are. That, of course, is imposter syndrome. The imposter alone is different, because the positionality is different. The lived experience of what it means to be something that somebody else is telling you you are, yet you believe something that's quite in contrast to that. When the world is telling you that you are to be something, yet you fundamentally at the core believe you are who you are, and you behave in a way that is different to how you're being told you behave. That is the imposter alone. We all have these challenges that we go through in life, and we all go through a journey where we engage with people in a way that we are measured. We are measured by society for being male, for being female, for being too tall, too short, too intelligent, not intelligent enough. We are always measured, and how we internalize those feelings and how we internalize the characteristics that others place on us is the key element of where the third space has its true essence. Because if we understand who we are at the fundamental core of our being, when we face situations where we are critiqued or we are measured, we at least have a basis for an argument for being an imposter alone. And being an imposter alone can be okay. Being somebody that doesn't actually believe what it is that you're being told from others, but understanding who you are and how you define and how you behave is okay. Zeus lived until he was 16 years of age. Chow Chows on average only lived to about 11 or 12. In the final year of his life, Zeus could not walk more than just a few steps. I remember in the final months, I would carry him outside and I would place him on the ground and I would pet him. I would give him food. He couldn't really see me. He couldn't hear. He ate very little, maybe once a week, and slept most of the day. He was in terrible shape, but I just couldn't let him go. I couldn't let him go. The dog control people came around and came around to see me because people had complained that there was a dog that was clearly not looked after. Zeus was cared for. He was just old and dying. Little did they know, those people who talked to the dog people, and when the dog people came around, little did they know that throughout that wonderful 16 years of Zeus's life, he had a colourful life. He grew up in a loving environment. He travelled by plane on numerous occasions. He went on a speedboat on numerous occasions. He rode in a motorcycle and sidecar on numerous occasions. Zeus had an amazing, loved life. And Zeus didn't care what others thought of him. He knew who he was. He knew how to be Zeus. He knew how to be the arrogant, strong, confident, beautiful creature he was. Little did everybody else know about what a life Zeus had, but he knew, and I knew. The third space life is one of adventure and dreams, but it is a lived experience of an imposter alone. The third space life may very well be unrecognizable to others, because others define what another person's life looks like from the outside. They do not define it from the inside knowledge. The third space life is the life of an imposter alone, and it can be lonely, and it can be fraught with self-doubt. Being told by others that you are not good enough, not appropriate enough, not doing or saying the right things, not being the right person at the right time for the right people. This is the lived experience of the third space person, the imposter alone. My name is Dr. Michael. This is the 13 Elephants podcast. Follow me in the story of the lived experience on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcast, and YouTube. I thank you also very much for the wonderful comments that you're sending me, and please continue to do so. I appreciate you all. I thank you also very much for allowing me into your space to share the story. Come along for the ride.